A little bit about reimagining the future, resilience, and rethinking strategy. So, Dr. Soaries, again, thanks so much for being a part of the conversation. You spent years talking about financial empowerment. That's how I met you. That's how we first engaged. But there are still some today who argue that there's these systemic barriers to financial freedom, making it nearly impossible for Black Americans to achieve it. So the question here is, can personal responsibility really overcome institutional racism?
Well, it's certainly true that institutional racism is pervasive. And it's also true that personal responsibility cannot overturn racism. However, personal responsibility is foundational for people who are going to survive and thrive in spite of racism. Racism made it illegal for Frederick Douglass to learn how to read, to be taught how to read. Personal responsibility took him to his private place late at night, lighting a candle, teaching himself how to read. Mm-hmm. So personal responsibility is the foundation for all of what we have to do to survive racism, to overcome racism, and to identify our options within the context of racism.
Yeah, that's well. So then the question, I guess, for me is there kind of a reframing how we resist sort of these barriers? So, sometimes it's so easy to say, I can't because of this, and racism is creating this obstacle. But is there a way that we can kind of reframe that for how we offer this to the next generation?
Yeah, and it's not that different than it's ever been for Black people. And it's certainly not that different than it is for other non-white people. Look at Japan. America bombed Japan in the 1940s. By the 1950s, we were buying cars from Japan. I don't think America changed its attitude towards the Japanese, but the Japanese made products that Americans needed and wanted. And so I think on an individual level, what we do is, in the first instance, we identify what are our gifts, what are our talents, and we develop them to a point of excellence, like we do in sports. Mm-hmm. I mean, racism doesn't stop LeBron James from being LeBron James. He has perfected the art of being who he is. What we have to do individually is identify what LeBron James potential do I have. Every child, every adult has the potential to be in their area what LeBron James is in his area, what Tiger Woods was in golf. We get it in sports, but there are computer programming geniuses in our community. Mm-hmm. There are writers who are geniuses in our community. There are preachers who are geniuses in our community. So it starts there. So what I call personal responsibility is the responsibility to identify and develop excellence in our own individual gifts, and then to scour the earth to find the opportunity for monetizing that gift. And when I say scour the earth, I mean scour the earth. There are over 1 billion Africans on the continent of Africa, 54 countries. It is completely possible to do something here that no one wants in America, no one, Black, white, or in between. And to go to Nigeria and to reach more people than you could have had you been in America. You can go to China. There are 1 billion people in China, 1 billion people in India, 1 billion people in Africa. That's 3 billion people. So as long as we're thinking about Houston or New Jersey, we're going to limit our options. But when we start thinking about the planet, which is what everybody else is thinking about, by the way, when we start thinking about the planet as our potential market, for our ideas, for our products, for our ministries, then we have a completely different understanding of how small racism actually is and how large our opportunities are.
Yeah. So I'm with you. I think that, it is critical that, hey, we identify some of these racist structures and we acknowledge the reality of that and we fight back against it.
Right.
But I think, is it what I'm hearing from you, this need to sort of amplify the opportunities that are available to us and then begin to kind of make the narrative much larger about there are so many ways in which we can create wealth, we can take advantage of opportunities, we can think creatively with the brilliance and genius of Black people as to how we can change what this looks like from a numbers perspective.
Well, that's exactly right. When I first met you, I did a little research on Humble, Texas. And Humble, Texas was not a friendly place for Black people.
Absolutely not.
But today, the main reason for wanting to go to Humble, Texas is to attend your church. So you could have said, well, I can't do a Black church in Humble. Look at the history of Humble.
Yeah.
But the reality is, without ignoring that history, you defied the power of that history.
Yeah.
Racism is not God.
Yeah.
Racism is a point of view by people, many of whom have some power, most of whom don't. And our entire experience in this country has been to thrive and grow in spite of racism. Because if we have to wait for white people not to be racist, we will never do anything.
Yeah.
Ever. And sometimes we give racism so much credit that it gives our children the impression that we can't do anything until racism goes away.
Yeah.
I function from the perspective that racism is never going away.
Never.
So therefore, I've got to win in spite of racism.
Yeah. You bring that up. Alma wasn't a very, nice place, I should say, that's the best way to say it historically. But our church does have a real kind of difficult past because we were kicked out of Humble, literally put out of the city so that there would be no Blacks there.
That's right.
But now, of course, we've come back. God has brought us to a central space in there.
And
but
the leaders of Humble come to you.
Sure. Well, I'd like to think that, because I think it's important that we make sure with the large demographic we have that our voice is heard and that we do make it clear you're going to have to come by and have a conversation before we make some major decisions.
Right.
So we do acknowledge that. We acknowledge that past history. We don't gloss over it. But that's the challenge that has created the opportunity and what we are. When you look at your life, when you look at some of the things you've accomplished, what has been kind of that toughest challenge you've ever faced and then pushed through?
Well, the toughest challenge for me personally was being diagnosed with cancer. Because when a doctor looks at you and says, you have cancer, at least for me, the first thing that came to my mind was what kind of casket will I have? I mean, wow. Cancer is tantamount to death. And that was tough. It was tough because I really didn't want to talk about it. It was tough because, I wasn't ready to die. I want to go to heaven, but I'm not in a hurry to get there,
Right.
So it was just tough, and I had to work through it. I wrote a whole book about it, Say Yes When Life Says No, because it was, at that point, I felt like I was at my peak. It was a year of the CNN documentary. It was the year that my body was in the best shape. I was walking 5 miles a day. I was eating good food, stopped drinking soda. My marriage was great. My kids were doing well, and then I got cancer. So that was a toughest personal challenge, and I never felt like I had cancer, but I was diagnosed as having cancer, and so it was tough emotionally, psychologically, and spiritually more than it was physically. I had surgery, and now I'm cancer-free for 15 years, but that was the toughest moment because I felt that it was over. The toughest professional moment was in the construction of our new church. The church took 2 times longer to build it than it should have. And it cost almost twice as much as it should have cost because of cost overruns and incompetence and lawsuits. And so when we moved into our new church building, our cost to occupy that building far exceeded anything we had planned. And that was challenging because I'm not a fundraiser. I don't believe in putting pressure on people to give money to church, but the only source of revenue you have to pay your bills is the offerings of the people.
Yeah.
So that was a tough challenge. And I thought for a moment I should leave the church and let them bring in some young guy that could raise some money because I'm not a fundraiser.
Wow.
I don't even like asking for money.
Yeah.
And that's when the Lord gave me the vision for D Free, because what I realized was that more important than the needs of the church was the financial status of the members. And more important than the 10% we wanted them to give to the church was the 90% and how they managed that for their own strength financially. But that was a tough one. That was an inflection point for me. I decided not to resign. I dove into our debt-free ministry, and it turned the church around, it turned my life around, and it introduced me to you.
Well, listen, I am so grateful to God you did not resign, because when I met you, your story and what you offered on that documentary revolutionized the way I looked at what we were doing. I mean, literally changed everything for me. Your book at the time, D Free, just changed everything. So I want to kind of walk back here to what you opened up and you talk about personal challenges, because, you know, like somebody like you, when I first met you, you were like, for me, epitome of where I want to go. I need to bend his ear because I want to talk to him to see what do I need to do to get there. So when I'm looking, nobody is seeing any type of challenge. None of us, you know, television is not showing us, okay, they're going through this, or even, you know, in the years that we've been friends. So then if you're looking at that and you're talking to a young millennial or somebody, you know, in the younger generation and trying to, how are you saying, don't let these difficulties or challenges shape what you believe is possible, or, you know, interfere with your willingness to keep going?
Well, you know, in my book, the first chapter of my book, which is based on John chapter 9, when Jesus met a man who had been born blind, the point that I make in chapter 1 was that the man, though he was blind and had been all of his life, was outside. That Jesus didn't come to his house and knock on his door. When he met the man had gotten up that morning, got dressed, left his house, and was on his way somewhere, which meant that when you have one problem, you only have that problem. So the man basically said, look, I'm blind, but I can walk, I can talk, I can hear, I can touch. And so what happened to me in meditating on that whole chapter, as I was trying to get out of this spiritual funk, as it were, because I had cancer, was don't let cancer define you. Don't let your one problem define you. Don't allow one obstacle. Don't allow one enemy. Don't allow one hater to dominate who you are. That you may have a broken leg, but you've got a second leg that's not broken.
Yeah.
You may have 5 haters online criticizing you, but you got 25 that like you. You may have, 3 or 4 members of your church who leave, but you got another 3,000 that stayed. Yeah. So if we focus on what we don't have, which is our deficits, then it will obscure the reality of what we do have, which is our assets. So it's always important to start with your assets. Listen, you talk about sports. If a team plays 10 games and they lose 9, when you ask them what is their record, they'll say 1-9. They always start with the wins and never start with, they don't say we're 9-1.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter how many games you win or lose, you always start with the wins. And that's what trained me to start with my assets and not my liabilities, to start with my strengths and my weaknesses, to start with my blessings and not my burdens.
Yeah. If I'm there at that moment and I'm dealing with adversity, and maybe you don't even know me, but then you meet me and I'm coming to you and I'm needing advice on how to get through a sticky point in life. What's kind of how you're going to shape resilience for me? How are you going to? What's that one thing that you're going to tell me that's going to help me see the power of my ability to get through this?
Yeah, I want to know, what do you have to work with? Because you've come to me based on the fact that your house is in foreclosure.
Yeah.
Or your girlfriend has cheated on you.
Yeah.
Or your health is not what you want it to be. And so what drives us to seek help is what's wrong. And good help will quickly help us identify what's right. And that's what I want people to know. I want people to understand what your assets are. Asset-based strategy is critical, because if we only focus on the problem, or we only focus on a larger scale on failure, it's what I say. I said it at a conference on the Black family. If all we talk about are single-family homes, then we'll never celebrate marriages that last, and we won't study them to figure out how to take those principles that help them and spread them. So if we have a failure-focused culture, we will reproduce failure by default. We have to have a strengths-based culture, an assets-based culture. I have to help you, if you've come to me for help, quickly identify what do you have versus what you don't have. What are your assets? What are your options? Because when we're out of options, that's when we give up. But as long as there's breath in our bodies, we have options.
So one of the things that I know about you is that I've seen you work with a lot of entrepreneurs, and you have a heart for that. When we talk about today, you know, we talked earlier about kind of this opportunities and streams. We talk about Black entrepreneurs, and talk about those who are starting businesses. Let's say you've got somebody who's struggling, and you've seen what success looks like. If you got 5 minutes with them, 5 good minutes, what's that one piece of advice you're going to give them that could literally change everything, you believe?
Well, what I want to know from an entrepreneur, especially Black entrepreneurs, what problem are you solving? What are you adding to the culture? What are you adding to the community? Or are you simply doing in the name of business something that makes you happy? Who needs what you have? And who needs it badly enough to pay for it? What problem are you solving? And sometimes the problem is obvious, sometimes the problem is not so obvious. We didn't know we needed iPhones, you know? No one asked Steve Jobs for an iPhone. There was no market research that indicated people would buy iPhones. But Steve Jobs had this vision that he could create an iPhone. The iPhone would basically replace the laptop computer. So now we use iPhones for what we used to use computers for. But he envisioned a gap in the world. And what gap are you filling? I had some young people call me last night who want to set up a business in my area, and they wanted to pay somebody thousands of dollars to do a study. And I said, don't spend that money. Let's talk about, what do you have to offer? Who is going to pay for it? How much will they pay? I mean, what gap are you filling? Every business has to fill a gap. And it has to fill a gap better than other people trying to fill the same gap. So you've got to really look inside and then look around. Sometimes the gap is in the Black community. Unfortunately, too many Black entrepreneurs are trying to fill Black gaps instead of filling market gaps. You know, I have 3 businesses, and none of the 3, well, 4 actually, none of the 4 depend on Black dollars. That my businesses are designed to solve problems for people who have a lot of money. And none of them are Black.
So we're too narrow. Sometimes in thinking, too limited maybe, and, you know.
Not just too limited ethnically, but again, I'll repeat what I said last time, geographically. My son trains basketball players. I took him with me to Ghana on a trip, and on 24 hours notice, he saw more young basketball players than he had seen the whole year before in Ghana. That, you know, I have a business in Ghana myself, and that business generates more money than the average Black business that is focused on the Black community in America generates. So Africa is wide open for Black people. And contrary to what we've been taught, most of us, Africa loves African Americans. They love our music. They love our clothing. They love our uh, everything. They love us. And so there are real estate opportunities in Africa. There are joint venture opportunities in Africa. There are natural resources opportunities in Africa. The richest Africans own oil. You know, the richest Nigerians, they're into oil, and in Ghana, it's gold and other natural resources. So I think, yeah, we limit ourselves. Every Black American should go to Africa.
Yeah.
Every one of us, at least one time. At least one time. And especially West Africa. But Rwanda was at war 40 years ago. Rwanda is one of the fastest growing economies in the world. Namibia was at war when I was in college. Namibia is one of the fastest growing economies in the world. So Africa is an absolute gold mine for us. But we don't have many discussions around that at all.
Yeah, and you know, I think one of the best gifts you can give is exposure to the next generation. And I think, you know, having conversations like this about opportunities, hopefully, is going to open up.
Yeah, that's great. But entrepreneurship is an option that I don't think we can ignore now. When you look at what happened to us coming out of enslavement after the Emancipation Proclamation, it was the Black insurance company, the Black-owned banks, the Black businesses that worked alongside Black churches to really create this infrastructure. You know, in Tulsa, Oklahoma, unfortunately, Black Wall Street was burned down in 1921, but it only took about 14 years to build Black Wall Street. You know, the apartment buildings, the stores, the barbershops. And I just think in the post-segregation era, we haven't thought as strategically as we should about owning our own. We were so excited about being integrated into society that we failed to realize that the majority of the people that create new jobs in this country are small businesses. They're not big corporations. So I'm spending a lot of time now. This whole category of creatives, that has become like a category now.
Yeah.
You know, when I was coming up, it was you were a writer, you were an artist, you were a photographer. But now there's a category, and it is a huge part of the economy. So you have the manufacturing sector, you have the service sector, and the creative sector. And this economy depends significantly on creators, and it's not just artists, but it's people that are creating from scratch based on their own genius contributions to how the economy runs. It's huge, and technology has sped up the way creators can insert themselves into the economy, and more people are going to have to really understand that. The older generation was taught, get an education, get a good job, stay there and retire. The younger people today understand the value and the potential of creativity for monetization.
Yeah. And no matter what age you are, embrace it, pursue it, or get left behind.
Or be left behind.
Well, I mean, what an incredible conversation. Again, I can't thank you enough, Dr. Soaries. And we got to come back and talk more about the Ghana piece and dig in, because I know that that's near and dear to your heart. But I'm so grateful again for you. Tell our audience again how that they can stay in touch with you.
Well, I'm honored that you would even have me, and I look forward to continuously engaging with your audience. My website is dbsoaries.com, and you can find out where I am, where I go, what I'm thinking, and connect to all of my other platforms from that site. My social media handle is at dbsoaries, DBSOARIES, and it's all of them, from YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, X, Facebook, TikTok. It's at DBSOARIES, at dbsoaries.
One of God's absolute best. I'm convinced of that. Thank you so much for joining us, and keep standing with Dr. Timothy W. Sloan. Join us again next time, but make sure you like, subscribe, tell your friends, share, and keep tuning in. Till next time, keep standing.